Ninde empati Sange Shindu Mite Guargi Dropun Namda Shinla Juparsho Hidam Guru Datna Mandala Kamniyatayami Sange Shidang Soki Chognam Lad Janshu Bardu Dakni Gyapsuchi Daki Junyen Gipe Sanam Ki Drola Venchir Sange Drupasho Sange Shidang Soki Chognam Lam Janju Bardu Dakni Gyapsuchi Daki Junyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Venchir Sange Druparsho Sange Chidang Soki Chognam Lam Janju Bardu Dakni Gyapsuchi Daki Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Venchir Sange Druparsho.
So please sit comfortably for a little bit of meditation with your spine straight, breathing gently through your nostrils. Check that your torso is in one plane. Count 21 rounds of your breath, just focusing on the sensation at the tips of your nostrils. Round begins with an exhalation and completes with an inhalation. In your mind, think about the holy being you feel closest to and visualize them, or in your mind call them and invite them here to the space in front of you. Try to tune in and feel their presence or see them glowing there in the air in front of you. Think of something beautiful that you would like to offer to please them, some outer object of the senses, whatever is beautiful to you, you can offer as a gift. mind, please bow down or prostrate to their good qualities and holy nature. Try to feel in your heart some specific quality you would like to cultivate that they have. Something you admire in them. Ask them to teach you in your mind. Ask them to help you gain the insight and understanding that you need. Spiritual goals and capacities. Think about a good quality that you have, some virtuous character, virtuous deed you've done today. Recall it very clearly and feel happy about it and offer that to them. Reflect upon some negativity or harm you've done recently, speech or deeds or even negative thoughts. Try to recall it very clearly. And reflect in your heart how you aspire to be loving and compassionate and kind, beneficial to people. And this was the opposite of that. Reassert your motivation, your intention. Try to feel some sense of regret doing the opposite of what you wanted. And decide in your mind that you'll restrain yourself to the end of the evening or some specific period of time from doing it again. And then again in your mind, ask this holy being who's with you to teach you and to not leave, to stay and guide you until you reach the end of your spiritual path. Paradise, enlightenment. And see or feel them coming to the space above you, above your crown, becoming smaller and radiant and abiding there, at the top of your head, facing forward. So homage to all holy beings, thank you for coming. So tonight we are on to course 3. We'll have 2 classes covering meditation, how to meditate, which is, I don't know, it seems a little redundant after having Lizette here teaching Mahamudra and the other 3 retreats going on about their beautiful experiences and everything they've done, but we'll do it. This is kind of a nitty-gritty instruction about meditation, right? This is a very Galupa Buddhist thing where it's, do it like this and don't do it like that. Make sure you have these components. If you forget this, that, and the other, then you have a lousy meditation. Include all of these steps. If you're going to meditate properly, this is how you do it. This is what you have to do. This is what you don't do, right? So, very nuts and bolts, very practical, very nitty-gritty, right? So, without further ado, I will do So there are a lot of different types of meditation. I mean, you can go just about anywhere and pick up a book or go to a class, and they'll be teaching some variation on the theme, right? But fundamentally, basically, meditation is a habituation process. It's a process of habituating the mind and training the mind, right? In Tibetan, it's gompa. And basically, when we meditate, we fix the mind on something. We practice putting the mind on something, fixating the mind on something. Mind is like a sponge. Whatever it's exposed to, it becomes like that. This is why we go to school. It's why we study. It's why we learn things, to absorb things with the mind and to imprint the mind and to habituate the mind, right? So we're going to talk about different types of meditations, why meditate, classic problems that arise during meditation, how you overcome problems of meditation, antidotes to those problems, and we're primarily working from a text called The Prayer of Samantabhadra and the commentary on that by Tsongkhapa in the late 1300s in the Lamrim Chenmo. Okay, so meditation is a tool, right? Meditation is not a goal itself. A lot of times people might think, I'm going to go meditate, and that in and of itself is spiritual, right? Or some spiritual accomplishment, right? But it's really a form of mental exercise and mind training, like anything else. It's like saying I'm going to the gym or I'm going to go jog or whatever the case might be. It's a form of practice. It's a form of mental exercise, right? It's not a goal. It's not a spiritual path in and of itself. It's a way of training the mind and refining the mind. Meditation is to develop a more focused, penetrative, precise, clear mind, so that we can use it for something and so that we can apply it to something, right? Our minds can be very scattered, or it can be very focused, it can be very deeply penetrating, or it can or not. So we're simply training the mind to be fit to do work, and that's why we meditate. So the spiritual value of meditation is developing this tool of our mind and then applying it to spiritual things. So developing a precise mind and a focused mind in and of itself doesn't get you anything spiritual. You can apply it to business or math or whatever you want. So our meditation practices are about developing the tool of the mind and then applying it to spiritual things to get spiritual results, right? So we habituate our mind and we train our mind and then we apply it to spiritual stuff. So there are basically two broad categories of meditation. One is called analytical meditation, where we train in lines of reasoning and logic, where basically we say, I'm going to analyze something. Someone might say to you, there's a life after death. And then we study it, we analyze it, we think it through, and you can sit down quietly on your own and go through the lines of reasoning and the logic and the analysis to decide, yeah, that makes sense logically, or no, that doesn't make sense logically. And that's a bona fide form of meditation. That's just analysis, analytical meditation. And that's one broad category of meditation, which is very useful and very necessary. Okay. The other broad category of meditation is called single-pointed concentration, where you focus your mind on an object without letting it waver. And that's normally what we think of when we think about meditation in the West. We're thinking about, I'm going to stare at a candle for 3 days or something, or I'm going to watch my breath for a week, or I'm going to visualize a Buddha or something like that. So we're primarily going to talk about that form of meditation. It's the fifth of the six perfections. If one is on the Bodhisattva path, which is where we're trying to benefit all living beings, then we're practicing six perfections, right? And the fifth of those six perfections is meditation, perfection of meditation, right? We can train in a lot of different kinds of meditation. Each meditation that we do has a different outcome. And it's like engaging in weightlifting. You lift weights this way, you build muscle. You lift weights that way, you build muscle. Meditation is the same. You do this kind of meditation, you get a result. You do that kind of meditation, you get a different result, and et cetera, right? So important to understand the meditation that you're doing and what the result is. There are meditations which lead to rebirths in higher realms, into rebirth in levels of the form realm, the formless realm. According to Buddhist cosmology, there are levels, higher levels above this realm where beings have great lives and long lifespans, and it's like paradise in a way where they have everything they want. They can live millions of years. Anything they think of is instantly there. All their desires are fulfilled effortlessly. They live these long lives and millions of years like godly lives, and then they exhaust that karma, and then they have a rebirth in hell. So, not a great outcome. So important to understand the meditation you're doing and what it's going to lead to, right? If you meditate a lot seriously, simply by virtue of sitting in meditation, you're not engaging in negativity, right? People who are serious meditators and putting a lot of hours per day into meditation are, by default, not out causing harm, right? So they're naturally restraining from collecting negative karma, which then produces a certain karmic outcome, right? So, if you start to meditate a lot, it's a natural byproduct to attain higher rebirths, especially if you're meditating upon virtuous objects, because you're naturally refraining from negativities and you're steeping your mind in virtuous thoughts and virtuous processes, right, which results in higher rebirths, which aren't really the goal because they're temporary, and then after however long in a higher realm, you're just back to where you started from, or perhaps even worse through through using so much of your virtuous karma in that rebirth. So, our goal is actually, and the point of Buddhist meditation is to refine our minds so that they can penetrate into a different level of reality and perceive a different level of reality. Ultimately, our goal as Buddhist meditators is to perceive ultimate reality or emptiness, right? And to do that, the mind has to actually be in a different realm. It has to be in a certain level of the form realm. There are 4 levels of the form realm, which are sort of higher realms than this, according to Buddhist cosmology. Okay, so we meditate to develop the mind as a tool, so that it can reach the place that it needs to perceive the level of reality, which will end our suffering. Right. So. Once we accomplish that, once we perceive ultimate reality, then we use that as a basis to live our lives differently and to collect, essentially to be virtuous 24 hours a day, continuously, so that we can put a permanent end to our suffering, right? To collect only virtuous karma and put an end to the collection of all of our negative karmas, so that we can live in bliss forever and paradise forever, right? All right. So please say Tingan-Zin.
Tingan-Zin.
So in Sanskrit, this is samadhi. You hear people talk about samadhi. I remember when I started studying many years ago, reading texts, and there'd be a picture of a guy all blissed out, and say, "Oh, this is sadhu, and he's in samadhi, right?" Samadhi simply means the ability to fix your mind on something single-pointedly, like a bug can fix its mind on something single-pointedly. The nature of our mind is that it's constantly fixated on things single-pointedly, but for like a split second. The nature of perception is the mind is flitting from thing to thing to thing, and that's how we perceive. The mind is going red, black, pink, face. Yeah.
Is shamatha and samadhi is it the same thing?
We get there.
Okay.
It's coming. So 3 minutes. So, the idea of having Tingan-Zin or samadhi is, it's not really the point. If we understand how the mind works, the mind is constantly apprehending points of perception. But it's not still and it's not stable, right? And it's flitting from point to point to perceive and put together reality. So, instead of having the mind hopping from point to point, we train the mind to be still and single point, to stand at a single point. And so the highest evolution of samadhi or Tingan-Zin is is called shamatha, or single point. It's a high form of samadhi, where the mind is focused on, without wavering, on a single point or a single object for a long period of time, right? So that's really the evolution of meditation and the evolution of concentration. So one can train the mind to be single pointed for hours, and you can focus it upon a girlfriend or something, but it's not what we're after from a spiritual perspective. What we're after from a spiritual perspective is gaining the insight and the understanding and the realization, which will put an end to our suffering forever, which is perceiving ultimate reality, right? So shamatha is the highest form of meditation, the highest form of samadhi, and the most powerful form of meditation, right? And it's only through shamatha that we can become enlightened. It's only through attaining shamatha that we can become enlightened. One has to have this meditative capacity to be able to perceive emptiness and ultimate reality. So if one does not achieve shamatha, one can't perceive ultimate reality. Okay, so that's the idea. Some questions? Okay, so then we'll get into meditating, and whatever meditation you do, it does, regardless of. All right, so I'm going to qualify here. So there's lots of meditation instructions, lots of ideas about meditation. The meditation instructions we're talking about tonight are from the Buddhist scriptures and information masters who have checked the instructions to ensure that they work, right? This is true of any text that we study and that's used in the monastery. They have to have been taught by an authentic source. They have to have been checked by masters of the past. They have to have been proven to work, right? So it's not just another, here's a good idea about how to meditate. According to Buddhism, this is how you meditate, and this is how you get meditative results. Okay, not just another guy's opinion, not just my opinion. So according to the scriptures and according to the text, this is how you get meditative results, and this is how you meditate properly. Okay? So there are 5 parts to every meditation. It doesn't matter what meditation you're going to do, every meditation you ever do, if it's going to work, and if you're going to do it properly, there are 5 components or 5 parts that have to be there. Okay? So the first thing you got to do is prepare. You're training your mind just like you're training to be an athlete, and you have to warm up and you have to prep. Right? Before you sit down and you start to meditate, you have to prepare to meditate. And if you don't prepare properly, then it's not going to go well. Just as if you're playing basketball, or if you don't warm up first, you'll pull a muscle or whatever the case might be. Okay? So that's the first part of every meditation practice is that you've got to engage in preliminaries. You've got to prepare to begin. Okay? And then secondly, you have to have certain conditions in your physical environment to be able to meditate successfully. All right? There are 6 conditions which are described, which are necessary and essential to be able to succeed in your meditation practice. And if you don't have these 6 conditions, then you don't have conducive meditation conditions, and things are going to detract from your practice, and it's unlikely that you'll do as well. Okay? And then the third element of each meditation is sitting properly and having the correct posture sitting on the cushion. If we're going to meditate, it's extremely important to have correct meditation posture. Sitting in a certain way facilitates the mind's ability to concentrate and focus and have the right degree of clarity and alertness, and not spacing out and not falling asleep and such. So we'll go into all these in more detail, but this is just the top level summary. So great meditators of the past have said that just assuming the correct posture can bring tremendous results, even if you don't do much more than that. And it's related to the impact upon your subtle body and your channels and your spiritual body. And by keeping your spine straight and sitting properly, it has an effect upon your subtle system and how it works. So we'll talk about that. And then the fourth part of every meditation is the mental process that you go through, right? When you can actually do something. Okay, you say, I'm going to meditate, and you warm up, and you get the outer conditions lined up properly, and then you sit down properly. Well, then what? What are you going to do with your mind, right? I mean, when you actually sit there, what do you think about? What do you do with your mind when you're in meditation? Do you just kind of look at the candle? Do you think random thoughts? Do you focus on, your navel? What? So we have to talk about what one does actually with their mind and what mental processes one engage in during meditative process, right? Okay, and then fifth is you have an object that you focus upon. What is the object of your single point of concentration, right? We'll talk about that. And then so those are the 5 parts to every meditation. You've got to work all that out, sort of in advance, if you will, of sitting down to meditate, or it's part of sitting down to meditate, right? Okay. Questions? All right. So I'm going to cruise through it here because.
What was third and fifth?
The third was the mental process that you engage in, what you do with your mind while you're sitting there.
Okay.
I thought that was
I thought that was
4.
4 is the object that you're focusing on. So you have it like, let's say I'm going to meditate on the cup. I'm going to meditate on this cup. I decide, I hereby meditate on this cup. This cup is the object of my meditation. Right? Well, then I'm going to do something with my mind around that cup, or toward that cup, or with that cup.
Is that third, the object?
Yeah. So you have the mental process that is going on, what your mind is doing during meditation, and then you have the object that your mind is focused upon. Right?
Was preparation not number 1?
It was
that
number 1. Yes.
It was?
Yes. First is preparation.
Yeah.
Second is collecting the outer environmental conditions.
Mhm.
Third is sitting properly, correct posture. Fourth is getting your mental processes lined up. And fifth is, the object that you're focusing upon.
What was first again?
Preparing,
Prepare.
warm up.
Okay.
So then we're going to go into each of those in more detail, right? I mean, it's not enough to say you got to warm up before meditation. You need to know how to warm up, right? It's like somebody saying, go stretch. Can you say a little more, please? Right? So, like that, okay? Okay, so the first is the 6 preliminaries. There are 6 preliminaries that one engages in to be able to meditate, to warm up and to prepare for your meditation practice, right? And the first of these 6 is I want to say something first. Why warm up and why do preliminaries, right? I mean, I think there was for me, and I think there are among many practitioners and meditators, an idea that there's some kind of mechanistic, formulaic approach to meditation which says, look, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to tell my mind to do this, and my mind's going to listen to me, and my mind's going to do it, and that'll be my meditation, and then I'll be done, right? It doesn't work that way. And that's a self-existent view that there is a me controlling a mind which will produce an outcome, right? It's not how things actually work. The way things actually work is that everything is caused karmically, right? The only way to have a nice meditation is to cause it karmically, right? There is no such thing as successful meditation, which comes from sitting down and saying, I'm going to meditate right now and make my mind behave the way I want it to, right? So there are certain causes which have to be put in place to cause the mind to behave a certain way, okay? And it's not, I mean, think about it. It's like if you say, I'm going to think happy thoughts now, okay? You're feeling lousy and you say, I'm going to think happy thoughts now. Does it work? Not typically. Right? I had a really lousy day and I'm going to think happy thoughts now. And then it's great, right? It's the same thing with meditation. It's like sitting down in meditation and saying, I'm going to meditate now and I will have a clear, focused meditation. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, okay? I mean, it's just as silly, right? It's just as non-productive. So I think it's important to have a context when we start talking about these elements to how to meditate properly, to recognize that most of us approach meditation from a mechanistic, I'm going to control it, and I'm in charge, and I'm going to tell my mind what to do, and therefore I'll have a nice meditation kind of way, right? But in fact, it doesn't work that way. Okay? So what this is saying is you have to set up the proper causes karmically to have a nice meditation practice, for your mind to behave in a meditative way. If you want to have a subtle mind, if you want to have a clear mind, if you want to have a focused mind, you have to set up the causes for it to be that way. And sitting down saying, I want it to be that way, isn't the cause. Right? So it's a little obvious, but we tend to not catch it, okay? So, just to make the point. Because, I mean, I know when we start to think about these things and we start to talk about these things, we go like, yeah, that's just like old Buddhist stuff. That's like old Tibetan superstitious stuff. I don't really need to do that, you know? But it's actually very important and very profound and very much addressing it at a more ultimate level than in this sort of conventional, mechanistic, self-existent way that we normally approach meditation, right? So I'll just give that preamble, okay?
But then how are the preliminaries the actual cause to cause the mind to fall into place?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, right? So that's why I wanted to have that frame of reference as we go into this, to say like, and as we talk about these things, think about it in that way. How is each of these things setting up the mind so that it behaves the way we want it to behave, right? So then let's look at it, right? Let's go into it. So as we go into, so the first of the 6 preliminaries is setting up a sacred space. You know, if you have a small apartment, if you have a big apartment, it doesn't matter. Find a place which you can make like a little special place, which is set off, which can be your meditation place, your little sacred place, a corner. You know, it could just be a cushion, against the wall somewhere, right? And whatever space you have, try to make it feel special. You know, try to make it something unique and something out of the ordinary. Okay, so that's the first of the preliminaries. Secondly, is to engage in making offerings. So, you know, we have an altar, for example, and there are water bowls on the altar, or some kind of offering bowls on the altar. And so each of these things we could go into a long thing, which really you should do the full course for. We're doing the summary of course 3, not all of course 3, but I'll go fast and we'll get as much as we can. All right? So, you know, setting up a sacred space takes the mind out of ordinary thinking, right? Takes the mind out of ordinary, helps to start to move the mind out of ordinary self-existent thinking. It's a shifting of gears in a way, you know? And so then making offerings, we have this idea of, okay, we have water bowls, and these are meant to be visualized or thought of as offerings to each of the different senses. One different substance, one bowl is representative of an object you'd represent to each of the 6 senses and mental consciousness, right? So, and normally when you set them up on the altar, you set them up from left to right, and when you're setting up so you know what is the effect of the mind to, you know, pour some water onto a little bowl and put it on the altar? When you're thinking, you know what, this is not a self-existent object. You know, there's a basis here. You know, this could be perceived as a lot of different things by a lot of different beings. I'm going to recognize its ultimate nature, its lack of a self-existent nature. You know, I'm going to see this as an offering to the senses of a holy being, as something to drink, and you know, because they have the karma, they'll perceive it as this bliss-producing liquid which they partake of, right? And it's an empty object. And so there's a whole thought process associated with setting up the offerings on, you know, in your altar, your sacred space, whatever. And then similarly, at the end of the day, when you take it down and you're pouring out the water, and when one takes it down, then one does it from the opposite end, and usually pouring out the water, the offering substance. You think, you know, this is the end of the day. You know, I could die today. You know, my life was satisfying. I did all the meaningful things I needed to do. And so, you know, it's a reflection on death and practice and training the mind in that regard. So even just making physical outer offerings in that regard is practicing thinking a particular way and shifting the mind into a different space and shifting gears in that way, right? Getting the mind into a different space with a different frame of reference. Okay. Okay, so that was the second one, was making outer offerings. And then
that lady who let you in is sitting in that chair. Just grab another one.
And then third is cultivating a feeling of refuge and bodhicitta, right? which is simply checking one's motivation, right? Which is, why am I sitting down here? What's the reason for sitting down here? What's my purpose for doing this? Is it just a rote exercise that I'm going through? Because everything becomes a habit after a while. It's like, okay, I gotta go meditate, and I plop myself down and I just mindlessly go about my meditation routine. Bum, bum, bum. 15 minutes later, I'm done and I'm off to work, right? So, the idea here of going for refuge and cultivating bodhicitta is that you cultivate certain attitudes. We have refuge prayer and things like that, and saying the words of a refuge prayer is not going for refuge. There are two things that have to be present to truly go for refuge, right? One is some kind of fear of suffering after we die, some kind of acknowledgement that there are lower realms and that we may suffer in a lower realm after we die. So, and then some feeling or belief that there's some kind of holy being or spiritual being or beings who can help protect us from that, right? So when we sit down to meditate, if we're not checking our motivation internally, say, am I doing this because I don't want to suffer in future rebirths, and am I doing this because I really believe there's some practice and holy beings who can help me to not suffer after I die, right? And that's why I'm here, and the way to do that, the way to practice, and the way to succeed in this path is through loving compassion towards all living beings, right? That's generating refuge in bodhicitta. It's not saying a prayer. And so if those thoughts aren't there, and we're not going for refuge, it doesn't matter if we blah blah a prayer 3 times and we sit down to meditate. We didn't really go for refuge if we don't have those feelings, right? So that's the third element of the preliminaries. Okay, it's going for refuge and cultivating bodhicitta. And then next is what's called visualizing the merit field. And it's called a merit field. I don't care for the term personally that much. It's basically, it's called a merit field because by thinking of some holy being or a collection of holy beings, we collect merit. And so it's, I don't know, maybe it's because Tibetans were farmers, you sow your seeds in the field and you get your results. So they have the idea of a merit field. I don't know. But the point is that there's some holy being or group of holy beings or collection of holy beings, all the holy beings you can ever think of, that you are relating to, you are imagining and relating to and engaging with in a virtuous way. And so by inviting, that's what we do at the beginning of class is meditation, right? By inviting a holy being, collection of holy beings, and then mentally discoursing, one's collecting a very virtuous mental karma, right? And one's putting one's mind in a particular space with a particular energy, right? So, and the point is not to have some vague, fuzzy idea that, there's some holy being. The idea is to try to train the mind to be precise and clear and focused and specific, right? So when you think about a holy being, think about whomever you feel most devotion towards or admiration towards, whoever has the purest, highest qualities you can imagine, whether it's, the Buddha or some great Lama you met once when you were 15 or, Jesus Christ or whatever, But to some very real, specific, tangible qualities that you admire, that you can relate to, that you aspire to have in yourself, right? And so again, you can see how this is affecting the mind and the resonance of the mind and the way the mind is positioning, right?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard teachings about, almost like there's no wrong sort of object. And I've also heard teachings that maybe are a little more galupta, like your teacher should be sort of a certain way, and it's very important sort of who you choose for your teacher. So sort of both, sort of sort of whoever in the moment, it doesn't matter, sort of who.
Pick your pet poodle, it doesn't matter.
And sometimes I feel like I can get into trouble with that. And
So I ask you, in the context of what we're talking about, which is training the mind, right? Exposing the mind to holy things and holy ideas and holy impressions, right? What would make sense to do? Would it be the same to visualize your poodle versus the most holy being you can imagine? Would it have the same impact upon your mind? Of course not. So,
Bruce might argue it differently.
he might. It's a good thing he's not here. But you know, it's about your mind. It's not about the outer object. I mean, you could visualize a rock and think about its ultimate nature, you know, and have a much more beneficial impact upon your mind and how you're habituating your mind to virtue and holiness than if you see like a statue, a plastic gold statue of the Buddha that you're trying to visualize as clearly as possible that exists from its own side as like a pretty Buddha statue, you know? Does that make sense? So that's probably more apt to what you're talking about, I think, you know? But you have to be very clear that it's not random. Meditation has a specific purpose and a specific goal, which is to train the mind, to condition the mind, to habituate the mind to virtue and to holiness and to single-pointed concentration, either through analysis or single-pointed concentration. The goal is always the same. The goal of meditation is to habituate the mind, to rehabituate the mind over and over and over again to be what you want it to be, rather than what it is reflexively, you know, which is full of dreck, you know, basically. So, you know, the way you get the mind from going like blah, 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 blah. I hate this, I like that, I want this, I don't want that. They did this to me, they did that to me, you know. I'm unhappy, I'm happy. I wonder what's for dinner. I mean, and it's like the discourse of our mind in our lives, right? This endless stream of garbage, which is of no consequence whatsoever, but which is, you know, ordinary life. You know, as opposed to having a mind which is constantly thinking, how can I help that person? Oh, that's a holy thing. Oh, that's a holy thing. Oh, this would be a really great virtuous thing to do. Oh, this would really make them happy. Oh, this is very beautiful. Oh, let me, you know, go help that, you know, that holy being over there. I mean, it's a very different life. It's a very different experience of life, you know, the one versus the other. You see? So the question is, which would you rather have, and which would you rather do? You know, would you rather train your mind to just think about better dreck, you know, or would you rather train your mind to think holy thoughts all the time? I mean, that's our goal, is to train our mind to be as ultimately holy and pure as possible, so that we can become enlightened, right? So it's not it's no laughing matter, you know. It's a deadly serious business, and meditating properly, and especially selecting the object of meditation, which we'll come to, you know, is very important. It's critically important, you know, and that's why.
And motivate the mind to become pure to what?
Sorry.
To motivate the mind to become pure to what?
Oh, to become pure and holy and virtuous, to become, you know, to become as holy as possible. Did you have a question?
I was just going to speak to what you asked about. Like, kind of what you said, like, sparked something in my mind. Like, we want it to be out of the ordinary and sacred. And I feel like the object that we're meditating on. And I feel like the stories that I read about where, like, dudes are prostrating to, like, a pile of rocks, it's, like, after they've already, and obviously there's no, like, formula, right? But after they've already had other things, like obvious sacred objects as the previous object, so that the rock becomes, or the sinful thing becomes more out of the ordinary.
Well, it's a function of your mind and your mind's capacity, right?
Right.
Yeah, thanks guys.
And so, you know, so when you talk about visualizing a holy being, say, you know, Holy Ken Rinpoche, for example, you know, he's 80, whatever years old, and he had thick bottle glasses, you know, and you know, and limped, and was a little, you know. And so they say, you know, the instructions are, when you visualize your Holy Lama, don't see them in a sort of an ordinary human form. Visualize them in an ideal form, without human defects, you know, without the glasses, or without the big, you know, wart on their nose, or, you know, the extra 40 pounds, or whatever it is, you know. So, you know, see them as purely as possible. The idea being, you're not trying to relate to an ordinary being. You know, you are, if you think about, this is a holy being, you know, what would a holy being look like for you? And so when you do these visualization practices, it's really not about what you see in front of you, it's about what you mentally conceive of as, you know, perfect and pure, you know. and so it's not a literal exercise, if you will, in that regard.
Most of the time, the preliminaries are directed to be completely literal. It's like a recipe that you're required to follow to do yourself.
Well, you go through those steps. It's a question of how you go through those steps, right? So, like, for example, in terms of visualizing a holy being in front of you, who do you visualize and what do they look like? And there are different schools. Like some schools say, well, if you're going to visualize, Tara or whomever, Tara looks like that, and only visualize Tara like that, right? But then another instruction would say, visualize Tara in your ideal form, whatever that is for you, because it's about your mind. You see? So, okay. So let's see. That was number 4, visualizing the merit field, right? And these are the beings that you're going to for refuge. These are the holy beings that you think can help you avoid suffering rebirths and lower rebirths, and help you to avoid suffering in this life. So you are visualizing the holy being in front of you that you are looking to count upon to put an end to all your suffering, right? And so you have to be thinking of them that way and looking at them that way, right? Right. And then the next preliminary is collecting good energy and purifying obstacles. Right? So
The number 6 or 5?
this is number 5. So there are various things that one does to collect positive energy and to release negative energy or negative karmas. And we're going to elaborate on it. There are actually 7 different things that one goes through here, and I'll come back to that. But for now, we'll just do the overview of the 6 preliminaries, right? So that was number 5. It's called one engages in what are called the 7 ingredients to collect good energy and purify negative energy. Okay, and we'll come back to it. So then the last of the preliminaries is called soul depth, and that is requesting blessings. And so this is a very interesting concept. If you have this being that you think is a very holy being, very high spiritual being, and you actually pray to them and you request them to bless you and to bless your capacity, to say, to beseech them to say, would you please bless me so that I can attain my spiritual goal of proceeding emptiness, of becoming enlightened in this life, and whatever it is, not just some vague, fuzzy, oh, please bless me, but to think in tangible, specific ways as to what one wants to accomplish and what specific capacity one wants to increase within oneself, right? So, what does it mean to be blessed? What does it mean to ask for a blessing? To be blessed means to increase your spiritual capacity. It literally means that, if you can meditate at 10% and you ask for a blessing, you're asking, hey, bump me up to 20% or 30% or 70% or whatever it's going to be, right? And how is that possible, right? Because no one else can fix you. It's all a matter of the karma we collect ourselves, right? No one can wave the magic wand and give you something and make you something you're not, right? We have to collect the karma ourselves, right? So the act of beseeching and asking for blessings is a collection of karma. The thought and the intention and the motivation and the aspiration from one's heart, which says, I really want this spiritual capacity. Please help me get this spiritual capacity, right? Please bless me to gain this spiritual capacity, is in fact mental planting of karma. You are collecting mental karma, right? By thinking those thoughts. And those karmic seeds will actually turn into the result, will actually ripen into the result of having that mental capacity, right? So it's very interesting in that regard. Jason Kappa spent half of his spiritual career doing nothing except asking for blessings. And he's this founder of the Gelugpa lineage and incredible holy being who wrote tens of thousands of pages of deep scriptural treatises. And he spent half of his time just saying, please bless me. Seems a little simplistic, doesn't it? Almost like a simpleton's practice. Oh, would you please bless me? Bless me, bless me. You know, but not, right? It's not. It's a very profound holy practice because it is the collection of karma which ripens into a result of perceiving oneself having additional higher spiritual capacity. Right? So, okay, so the faith in the undertaking of asking to increase your virtue is the thing which creates the karmic seed, which results. Okay, so those are the 6 preliminaries. All right. So if we go back to what we were talking about, right? We're talking about the 5 parts of meditation practice. So when you first sit down to begin your meditation practice, those are the first 6 things you do. Your preliminaries, right? Sit down on the cushion and you, well, I guess before you sit down, you set up your little sacred area, right? Your offerings, you put out your physical offerings. Then it's implied that you sit down and you mentally create the attitude of thinking about your suffering, and there are beings that can help you be free from your suffering, and going for refuge to those beings, cultivating bodhicitta, seeing those beings in front of you and having that rapprochement with them, right? And then engaging in practices to collect good energy, which we're going to talk about next. We're going to come to. And then asking for the blessings. All right?
Could you say it again? The
Yeah.
5 things?
Sure. Preparing to begin. And then collecting the outer conditions in the environment. And then the mental processes. Getting your mental activities straight. And then focusing on the object. Those are the 5 things. Selecting the object and focusing upon it.
Connecting outer conditions, having this, your
The mental process.
mental process.
Mm-hmm. And then having the outer object of the meditation.
Before mental process is like being your spine straight, right?
No, that's physical. That's
Okay.
physical. So it's what you're thinking about and how you're thinking.
So preparing, collecting outer conditions, mental process.
Mm-hmm. And then the object.
That's 4, right?
Sitting properly is the 3rd.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You want to look at my list?
Yeah, we're not going to be able to slow down enough for you to type with your finger the whole time.
Okay.
We're going to have to move on. It'll take way too long.
Sorry.
It's okay. All right. So okay. So we'll re-enumerate the 5 of these and the 6 of those and the 7 of these. It can trip you up a little bit, so don't get tripped up, okay? So you have the 5 main parts of meditation, all right? The first one is the 6 preliminary, okay? Now, we're going to do the 7 things, the 7 ingredients, the 7 elements which collect positive energy.
Which are part of the 5th.
Which are in the preliminaries. So, if you take the 6 preliminaries and throw in the 7 ingredients, you've actually got 13 things in there. So, perhaps an easier way to think about it. So if we talk about these 7 things, these are ways you collect positive energy and clear negative energy. Okay. The first of them is you're already sitting down at this point. Okay. So you're prostrating in your mind. In your mind, you're sitting there, and you can visualize or imagine millions upon millions of emanations of yourself filling all of space in every direction, bowing down or prostrating to this ultimate holy being that you admire, right? And so this is a positive energy. This sets up positive energy and collects positive energy, right? Positive karma, I would say. So, and then secondly, you visualize yourself making offerings to holy beings. So, and it's a mental process. You can think of, I mean, let's say, you're visualizing, Avalokiteshvara, for example, with 1,000 arms, and you could visualize emanating countless beautiful offering beings, dakas and dakinis, giving all these objects of the senses to them, and they're partaking of them, experiencing great bliss, and it has an effect upon your mind. Right? And we can go into a long discourse on that alone, but I'll just leave it at that. What basically said, right? Whatever you think, whatever the content of your mind is your reality at that moment, is your valid perception at that moment. So you can think about that. And then it has an impact upon your mind and how it functions. Okay, and then the third thing we do is called it's called chakpa in Tibetan, which is opening yourself or confession. This is the only one of the seven items here, which actually is geared towards removing negativity, negative imprints, and negative energy. The other 6 are oriented to building positive potential in your mind. So all of these positive steps to collect the positive energy is putting your mind in a space to be able to meditate nicely, right? So, for example, when you're prostrating, if you're just bowing down without thinking, you're just doing physical exercise. You may as well go to the gym. The point of prostrating is to be thinking certain thoughts. The point of all these practices is to be training the mind and to be thinking certain thoughts. So one does 3 prostrations, for example, when you physically prostrate. And the reason to do that is just to think, each time I'm bowing down to enlightened beings who have ended all suffering through understanding ultimate reality. And then the second time I'm bowing down to the teachings on ultimate reality and emptiness. And then the third time is I'm bowing down to those beings who have had a direct experience of ultimate reality, the Sangha, right? And so similarly, when you do the hands, in the 3 places, it's the thing of the body, speech, and mind, and collecting the karma of body, speech, and mind. So all these things that we're engaging in are not meant to be empty rituals and just physical going through the motion, sort of hollow gestures, if you will. So all of it's a mind training. All of it's intended as a mind training practice, such that we are constantly working with our thoughts and the content of our mind. So if we're prostrating, going like, "Oh, that was a big lunch. It's hard for me to bend over," it's not really very effective, right? I hope I don't bump my head on the floor. I look really stupid. If I made a big thump, not really very useful, right? So this is the case with all of the process, everything that we're engaging in like this. Okay. Okay. So we are on. We did visualizing. We did prostrations. We were on confession, right? Chakra. So there are certain negative energies which prevent us from being able to meditate. If we have certain things on our conscience, the mind can't focus, and the mind can't be still, and the mind cannot be settled. If there are certain energies or certain thoughts or certain behaviors within the mind, it isn't able to be subtle and still and focused, right? And so we have to clean these negativities from our mind to be able to meditate effectively and to be able to meditate well. And so purifying any negativities in our mind is an extremely important part of the preliminaries, right? And so, it's not just sitting down and saying, "Oh, I confess I was a bad boy, and let's move on and I'm done," right? I mean, we have to apply the 4 forces, 4 steps to purify negative karma, which involves remembering refuge, our aspiration to have love and compassion towards all living beings, right? We're trying to help people, we messed up, we hurt people, someone, whoever. And feeling some real regret about it and applying some kind of antidote, whether it's thinking about karma and emptiness or doing a Vajrasattva practice or whatever it might be, right? So when we engage in confession, it's important to have those four forces there, very important, to get rid of the negativities which are hanging around our mind, right? We have to clean our mind of those things. And we have to resolve not to do it again, which is a very important element of that. Okay. So then next is rejoicing, feeling happy about our own good deeds that we engage in and other people engage in. I think this is something I'm very bad at, and I imagine Westerners are pretty bad at in general. I think that's my experience is we tend to get down on ourselves. We don't give ourselves credit. We don't say, "Oh, you did a good job there." There are people who are amazing practitioners who have done profound work, and they're like, "Yeah, I didn't do enough. I didn't work hard enough." I'm not a very good spiritual practitioner. That's actually quite counterproductive to your spiritual progress and your spiritual path if you don't acknowledge what you've accomplished and your goodness. The point of the spiritual path is to be happier and to feel better and to just really get off on doing good things, right? And if we're not giving ourselves credit, then how are we going to succeed? If we're not patting ourselves on the back and acknowledging ourselves and building ourselves up when we do good things, then there really isn't the energy to continue, right? If we're not really celebrating what we accomplish and what we do, it's counterproductive, So very important part of the preliminaries to actually be happy, to feel really happy about the goodness that we've collected, So it's like, I taught 300 classes, but I never say, "Good job, John," Just like, "Oh, wow, I got 30 more to do, shit," All right. So yeah.
Is there a reason why they do the confession first? Because I know in for example, the 6 Times a Day book, Krishna specifically says to do the good deeds first, and then
In case you die,
yeah.
so that you can have the positive things on your mind first. Personally, I think it's because we need to focus on the good things we've done.
But I mean, this one is reversed, right? You do the confessions.
In terms of the order?
Yeah, you do the confessions first, and then you do. I don't know
Well,
if there's any specific reason why.
yeah. No, I mean, if you remember, you're going through 13 things here.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're doing a lot of good things and positive things. Why are you rejoicing after you confess? I don't know. I don't know if there's a particular reason. I couldn't say. I think the point is you just do them all. I'm sure that one comes before the other is essential, as long as you get it all in there. That's my opinion. So, you can be happy that the Dalai Lama is out there teaching. You can be happy that Hector's teaching. You can be happy that somebody helped the homeless guy and gave him a sandwich. It doesn't matter what it is. You can be happy that some relief agency is, helping the people who are just flooded in the monsoon. But the point is to really feel happy and good about goodness. Because it has a real impact on the mind and the energy and how we're living and relating in the world. So very important element of it. Okay. And then next, and the other thing to say about it is it actually increases your positive energy exponentially. Being happy about goodness is a very, very powerful practice. It really supercharges your ability. It really supercharges your positive potential. And the same is true of the opposite. Never acknowledging your positive work is really meaningfully undercutting ourselves. Right? And so feeling happy about it really massively strengthens our ability to do good in the future. It really is a very strong support to our virtuous practice. Okay. So then the fifth of the 7 is to request teachings. that whatever holy being you are relating to and thinking about, is to urge them to teach you, right? And again, it's the karmic cause that ripens into the result. So the act of asking, right, is the thing that produces the result. So, how often is it that, holy beings aren't asked to teach, I mean, it's very interesting, like in the FPMT, which is a large organization, the Lama Supa Rinpoche travels around the world teaching. They got 160 centers, and some centers are like, why does he always go to Australia? He never comes to the United States, And then you talk to the secretary, and he's like, well, because they ask about 100 times, like in Australia, and they ask about 3 times in the United States. So he goes to Australia. It's kind of common sense, but it's just the same thing in your meditation practice. You're engaging a holy being, and don't think that it's at a level that's just fantasy. I mean, holy beings are not just like little glowing orb that's in a physical spot somewhere over by Pluto or something. I mean, it's a mental process. It's a mental experience that you're having with an omniscient being that can perceive everything simultaneously everywhere. So don't have this little limited idea of like, well, I'm just imagining a holy being in front of me, and I'm making it all up, and it doesn't really count, and it's really just me here alone, like telling myself stories. It's not like that. So, all right. I mean, if there are omniscient beings, if there are holy omniscient beings, they get it. They hear you. You're having a conversation, even if you can't hear them. So approach it that way. And relate to it that way, and think of it that way, right? And you are creating a karmic connection and creating a karmic cause, which will produce a result. Okay. So that's requesting teachings, and you're asking them to stay is the next one. Number 6 is asking them to stay in your life, to stay near you. Don't move. Don't die. Don't stop teaching. Don't ignore you. Don't give all your attention to the student sitting next to you and get blown off all the time. Whatever it might be, right? So, those also the collecting karmic causes, which will turn into resolve, right? And then finally, dedicating, which is dedicating your positive activities so for the benefit of every living being. I'm engaging in these undertakings. I'm doing these things to end suffering everywhere for every living being. Right? Very powerful. Right? Very powerful mental state that one is creating. Very powerful energy that one is creating with the mind. Right? So that takes us through the preliminaries. And then we're on to the conditions of the environment, right? Which is the second of the things, the main points. All right. So just do it simply. The first part of every meditation is the preliminaries. We have a total of 13 things which we just went through, which get your mind ready, set your mind up with a particular energy, clean up obstacles in your mind, create a certain resonance, a certain way of thinking, a certain amount of virtue, create certain karmic causes and connections, and set the ball, get kind of sets the ball rolling, if you will. Okay. So that's good. Then where are you going to meditate? People say, "Oh, I'm going to go to India. India is the best place to meditate." I always want, if I'm going to do any kind of meditation, it should be in India. And they go to India, and there's like dogs barking 24 hours a day, and like loudspeakers blaring, and horns, and like stink and filth, and like and illness, and like dysentery, and on and on and on, right? So not really conducive to meditate. So your environment should be completely supportive of your meditation. Geshe Michael tells the story of he always wanted to meditate in a cave. So he found a really good cave to go meditate. He went and tried to do a month of meditation in the cave, and it's like he couldn't meditate. There's like bugs crawling on you in the dark, and like water dripping, and you're cold and you're wet. It's not supportive. It's not conducive, right? So the point of meditating is to be able to meditate. And wherever you do it, shouldn't detract from your meditation. It shouldn't detract from your ability to concentrate. You should have everything you need on a physical level provided for. You should have heat in the winter, convenient and quiet. You should have cooling in the summer, convenient and quiet. You should have safety and security. You shouldn't have to worry about somebody breaking in or mugging you, right? You know, all of your physical needs should be met. If you're doing a longer retreat, you should have good support lined up so that people are delivering your food on a timely way, right? If you meditate in a lousy place, then forget about it. You're going to have a lousy meditation, right? So it shouldn't be counterproductive to your concentration, right? When you go into retreat, you just want to concentrate. And you don't want to encounter anything which is going to distract you from concentrating. You know, so it shouldn't be anything on a physical level which is going to get in the way or impede you or you know, create any problem at all. So noise is the worst. Like if there's any kind of noise, then, you know, especially a repetitive noise, then forget about it. You know.
Television.
Yeah, like if the neighbor's got a television blaring, or if the radiator pipes are constantly banging with the steam in the winter, or you know, whatever it might be. Yeah. So you gotta pick your place. You have to think about your environment. If you're gonna, I mean, obviously, if you're meditating every day at home, you're limited, you know, in terms of what you can do. But if you're going on retreat, particularly, you really got to select the place with that in mind. Okay. And in terms of the support people for the retreat, you know, if you're doing a month retreat or a longer retreat, you really need support people who are aligned with you. You know, you don't want somebody who's sort of doing it grudgingly, where you're a bit of an inconvenience and they're helping you out because they owe you or something like that. You know, it really needs to be people who have meditated and understand meditation, what to do, what not to do. It should be people who believe what you're doing is you know, valuable and worthwhile and meaningful. Something like that. Okay. Let's see. Next condition of the environment is to have few wants. Sounds easy, right? If you go into retreat, if you're meditating, if you're talking about a daily practice, it's one thing, but then we start to talk about doing longer periods of retreat. It might be a week or a month or 3 months or 3 years or whatever it is, right? So have few wants, right? You need to have an attitude where you're content and you're not always thinking about things you want and that you're craving, right? Like, you gotta live simply. It's sort of like, I'm not thinking about Oreos all the time. I'm not thinking about dating all the time. I'm not thinking about, you know, I wish I had this, that, and the other thing, right? Because they're outer distractions, right? Have to have this attitude of, I'm here to meditate, and the only thing I really want to think about, and the only thing I want to do is meditate. Because when you sit down and meditate and retreat, the mind is naturally going to want to be distracted. It's naturally drawn up to other things, and it naturally wants to not meditate. It wants to think about, you know, oh, that restaurant I went to was such a good dinner, you know? And oh, you know, that date I went on was such a good date. You know? So, you know, the idea that I need things, or if I don't have like dessert, there's something wrong, you know, or whatever it might be, you kind of let go of it all and just be content to just have a very simple day, very simple activities, very simple undertaking without the mind being drawn out. Okay? You know, it's not like, well, they didn't deliver, you know, chips with my meal today, and so I'm not happy, you know, or like the food they delivered this week, you know, it's just beans and rice, and I'm so sick of beans and rice. I mean, it's just whatever you get, fine, you know. It's not the point. The point is not the food. The point is not, you know, not any of those things. It's just, you know, forget about anything else except meditating. It's like, whatever they bring, no problem. You know, whatever happens, no problem. I'm just here to meditate. I don't need anything else. I don't want anything else. It's just about what I'm doing in my mind. Right? Just like that, right? Don't care what problems come up. You know, doesn't matter. Just here to meditate. The electricity goes out, that's okay. You know, if the water pipes break, that's okay. And then I remember I was doing a month retreat one time. I rented a cabin up in the Adirondacks on a lake. It was off season because, you know, I want a quiet place, right? So I said, oh, okay, it's great. It's a lake. The rental season's over. There are all these cabins. People use in the summer for boating. There's nobody around. It's October. I'll rent a cabin. It's great. So, you know, I get there and the cabin's like up on cinder blocks, and the water pipe's like a plastic pipe that runs up like from the ground up through the cabin, like, you know, through about a foot of winter air. You know, about 3 weeks into the retreat, what happens? The plastic cracks. And then there's no water. It's like, what the heck? It's only a week. You know? that's life, you know. You're there to meditate. You just meditate, you know. I mean, I remember reading Cave in the Snow from Tenzin Palmo. She's like, yeah, after about a year and a half into my retreat, my retreat support stopped coming, you know. They just stopped bringing food. I had a little turnip garden, you know, and I just lived on turnips, you know. You know, it's like you're there to meditate, you know. It's like whatever happens, that's just it, you know. You deal with it. It's like, okay, so I won't use much water, you know. I won't eat much food. It doesn't matter, you know. I'm just here to meditate. So it's really, you know, it's really just like that, you know. So do the minimum amount necessary and don't be distracted from meditating by all the outer stuff that we normally like get busy with. It's like, oh, I gotta clean the cabin every day, you know. Oh, I gotta blah blah blah. I gotta do. I gotta. No, you just let it all go. You know, you're not there to do anything except meditate, right? All right. And so that's the fourth one. Give up activity. The fourth condition of the environment is you have to let go of all those other activities. Give up a lot of activity. It's just, you know.
What was third then?
The third one was be satisfied with things you have.
The second?
That's the second one. So
What's the second one? He said.
okay, so let's go. So we'll go through it. So
Have he wants was the second one I put down.
yes. So have few wants is the second one.
Right.
Okay, which is like don't be craving things.
Right.
And then, you know, similar to that is be satisfied with what you have. So, you know, if they give you lousy food, be satisfied. Don't be thinking, you know, I need things and I don't like what they're bringing me. Would be the way to express those two things. And then the fourth is giving up a lot of activity. You know, is don't feel like you're supposed to be doing something else other than meditating.
So who's number 3 then?
Be
Be satisfied with what you get.
Oh, be satisfied with what you get.
And then, you know, don't feel like
And then be satisfied with what you get.
don't feel like you need to go on a, number 4 is don't feel like you need to go on a hike every day. Don't feel like you have to clean dust every day.
What would you call number 4 again?
Is give up activities, give up other activities, give up being busy.
This sounds idyllic for me, and it's probably just because I'm not very good at meditating, or giving up activity, or being content, or satisfied.
May not be very idyllic in that case.
So in that case,
It'd be pretty hard.
Am I not meditating then, or is it like, are these kind of like, how integral are these to your meditation?
Well, we're talking
practice?
about retreat now, really. When you talk about setting up a place, you can't do all this in your apartment per se, right?
Right.
But I mean, you can take it as a microcosm and say, you know, if you're going to sit down for half an hour every day, for that half an hour, don't think about dusting, you know, don't think about going shopping, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, I mean, you can look at it as a microcosm. But then if you're going to do a week of retreat or a month of retreat or whatever, it's much more literal, you know? You know, you run out of food, you ran out of snacks, be okay with it, you know? You ran out of fresh vegetables, be okay with it. Don't be upset, right?
I mean, ultimately, that's how you should be in your day-to-day life
Yeah.
in general, too.
Sure.
So,
Ideally, sure.
ideally, I should say.
Yeah.
Also,
Mhm.
also, I like what has to be mentioned for the positive side. When you build up your concentration, you don't need to eat as much, to sleep as much. You don't need all the distractions that naturally kind of kills when you have high concentration.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. You know, so we're talking about how to set up proper conditions for meditation physically in the environment. But it's also the case that once you have meditated, that these things all fall by the wayside. You know, but we're talking about in the beginning. You have to get from point A to point B. You know, so it's true. Once you set it up and once you engage in retreat, if you set it up properly, if you do these things. And you can go in nicely and not be distracted and actually have your meditation retreat. As you get into the retreat and as you start to meditate, you naturally don't care about those things and you naturally don't think about those things. But in the beginning, you have to kind of make sure you're not doing it. Okay. Let's see. And then 5 is very important. Maintaining an ethical way of life is a conducive condition for retreat. You know, why? You know, why is an ethical way of life important for retreat and for meditation? Because the content of your mind affects your meditation. And if you got a lot of negativity in your mind, you can't concentrate. You can't get still and you can't get settled and you can't concentrate. And when you go into retreat especially, whatever energies or mental content you bring into retreat with you become more and more powerful, and they expand. And so if you're doing retreat, especially the longer the retreat is, it becomes more and more important to do powerful virtue going into retreat. You want to collect a lot of virtue going into retreat, and you want to very meticulously avoid negativity and purify negativities going into retreat, because any negativities in your mind, whether it's anger or jealousy or whatever, harming, will expand and will blow up in your mind. And so if you go into a retreat, if you go into a longer retreat with, say, some kind of hostility in your mind, you could very easily end up, feeling like there are all sorts of hostile things going on around you where you're not safe and you're not secure and you're freaking out and, feeling like, you're going to go crazy or something. So, and then the same is true on the virtuous side. As you collect virtue going into retreat, that expands exponentially and becomes more and more powerful and more substantial, right? So it's very important prior to retreat to avoid doing non-virtues, right? And when meditators go off to when serious meditators go off to do long retreat, meditate on emptiness particularly, they engage in powerful virtue before they start. They collect substantial amounts of goodness and virtue and positive energy before they kick off their retreat with that understanding. So, yeah.
Do they dedicate it specifically toward a successful retreat then?
Perhaps. I mean, it's personal, but one could, would think. Yeah. I suppose that you can't, emphasize it enough that every perception we have, every experience we have of reality is a function of thoughts arising in our mind, right? Why do certain thoughts arise in our mind? I mean, why do certain perceptions occur to us? Why do certain valid realities, come in through our senses, right? Into our mind? It's because of, past karma collected, right? So, if one is going to meditate, if one cannot meditate, it's a perceptual event. It's a valid perceptual event. I can't sit down and meditate. I'm too busy. I have too many things going on. I can't get up in time. I can't get to bed on time. That's a valid reality. That's a karmic ripening. Oh, I can sit down and meditate. Oh, I can do nice preliminaries. Oh, I can concentrate. Oh, I can have calm, subtle, still mind. That's a perceptual event. I am perceiving myself doing it, and it is my valid reality, right? My mind is functioning that way for a reason, and not because I just told it to in the moment, right? So, these things are asserting themselves in my mind. These things are ripening. These perceptions are valid. This is my reality. This is my life because I caused it in the past. My mind is functioning this way because I set it up that way in the past, and my mind is functioning that way now. So, if we're not ethical, right? If we're not cleaning negativities, how can we have a valid perception of a pure mind? Impossible, right? I mean, our goal is to sit down, have a valid perception of a clean, pure, still mind, right? Such that it's existing at another level of reality, right? More profound than this one, right? So, how can we possibly have that perception of a mind which isn't that, right? I mean, if the mind is full of, I don't know what to call it, if the mind is full of problems and confusion and, obscurations and obstacles and afflictions,
That's our valid perception. I mean, it's actually very simple, it's actually very straightforward, The content of our mind is our valid perception, period, So it's only possible to sit down and meditate nicely if we have collected the causes for that valid perception. It's only possible to sit down and have a nice meditation and profound insight if those causes were collected previously and ripened into that valid perception. Yeah.
Is the direct perception of emptiness therefore a function of karma, not wisdom?
Absolutely. Well, they're not separate in that way. Is the direct perception of emptiness a perceptual event?
Yeah.
Is it a function of the mind?
Yeah.
Can it only happen if the mind functions in a particular way?
Yeah.
Is the mind the expression of karma ripening?
Yeah.
There you go. So, absolutely, So there is no self-existent perception of emptiness, There is a collection of causes of purity and virtue and whatever else you want to call it, which is a mind functioning to validly perceive in a certain way. And when it perceives in that way, it perceives that reality. So our goal is to get the mind to a place where it's validly perceiving stillness and purity and clarity and higher reality. Right? It's not mechanistic. The mind must assert itself without us saying, mind, I want you to assert yourself. Right? Because it doesn't work that way. Right? So we have to set up the causation for the mind to, at some point in the future, assert itself and have a valid perception of that type. And so that's what all this is about. All this is about, and you have to have a break, don't we? All this is about, if you don't set your mind up like this, the causes won't be present to ripen into the result of a pure, clear, still mind, which can perceive ultimate reality. Take a break, please. Forgot the bathroom break, and then we'll continue on. I'll try to zoom through this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.